playing with exceptions isn't too difficult to get set up. We're going to start with a brand new project to do that. So I'm going to create a new Java project here. And being in Eclipse, we just start off with a base folder structure. We have to create our own main class here. So we'll start here, and unlike in NetBeans, if you get to using that tool, we have to do it by hand. For a main class, control space is our code complete, and then we can type main and code complete, and it gives us the definition of a main program. So for the exception, we can do something simple, like let's say we want to get an integer from the user. So we'll say age is what we're going to get. And so J option pane. This is a way, control space completes that code. This is a way where we can say a show input dialog to ask a question of the user by giving them a message. What is your age? And then from that, we can say system.out.println age that they printed. That'll show us their age. Type mismatch, not go from int to string. Okay, so the first problem here is if we want to get the age as an integer instead of a string, we have a mismatch inside of here. So wait, that's what our data modeling is. We want a number, we want an age, because maybe we want to do something with a number. So like maybe what we want to do is say age 10 years ago equals to age minus 10. And really what we're going to print out here is age 10 years ago. So we can say you were 10 years ago. So maybe that's the goal we have going on here. The problem is we get a string when we ask the user to type something in. Everything you type with a keyboard ends up as a string inside of a Java program. But we want a number here. So we have to deal with this mismatch of data types. So I could say string age text right here, and that could be equal to this asking what is your age. But then how do I get the age text to be the number? So oops, yeah. So oops, sorry. So let me just say, just comment this out for a second. Sorry. And say age text right here. I can't do this because once again, age text is a string. I can't say a string minus an integer. And there's no definition. The operator minus is undefined for the arguments of type string integer. We have no way of defining a method that takes a string and subtracts 10 from it. So that won't work. So what I have to do is I have to turn the age text into an age. So the way I can do that in Java is I can say integer dot parse int from a string age text. So it takes our age and turns it into a number. Then we can subtract 10 from it and say print out you were whatever age 10 years ago. So now if I run my program here, very simple little application, it pops up. What is your age? I can say my age is 29, because that's what all of our ages is after the age of 29. And so you were 19 10 years ago. Perfect. My program works fantastic. Well, if I run it again and I don't type in something quite as useful right there, so let's say I type in 30 right there. Well, I have a number format exception. So this is where our exceptions come in. A number format exception explicitly for the input. So you can see there's data inside of there that stored the text 30 that I typed in. And so it was trying to type it in. Now, beyond there, you can see the error in this number format exception was line 65. It came from the integer class 580, which came from the integer class 615, which came from my code right here. If I click on this, you can see it highlights the code, line 8 of my exception example right here. So you can see this is all the information that's stored in the exception. And when they happen, it prints out this great bit of information that tells me exactly where this error came from. So it came from here. Well, how do I deal with this? Well, I have to be clever. I have to basically handle that exception. Now in Java, there's no way to ask, is this string a number, because in order to turn a string into the number, I would have to attempt to make that change, and when it failed, I would get an exception, and then when I get that exception, I would return to you, no, that's not a number. So why convert the number when you're just about to convert the number? Why not just try and convert the number and then deal with the exception? That's the logic behind this code. So what I can do here is I can say try around this whole thing. I can choose someplace else, and then I'm going to select these lines of code, and I'm going to hit the tab character to move them over to keep my code structure looking correct. And then I put a close curly bracket here and say catch. All right, and then I'm going to put 2 more curly brackets here just to complete my logic, but then I'm going to go back here and deal with my catch logic. You can see syntax error. I'm expecting a formal parameter after this token. So that's not a very useful error. What formal parameter is expecting? Well, it's expecting the name of an exception class. So I could be very specific and say number format, control space. You can see it's number format exception. I can hit enter right there. Now I save that. I still haven't got rid of the error, because syntax error, insert variable declarator ID to complete formal parameter. What a terrible, terrible error message. What's it saying? It's saying I'm expecting a name of a variable here. E, or NFE, or Tony, or Frank, or whatever you want it to be. E is the common one that you use for exception. There's a name of exception E. And so if I have an exception, I need to do something else. So I can say system.out.println. I asked you to type a number. Was it that hard? And then semicolon at the end. Okay, so this is the start of a program here. So we run the code here, and what's our age? And I put in garbage that's not a number, and it says, I asked you to type a number. Was it that hard? Because an exception happened here. I could run this code again, and it says, what's your age? I could put in a number that's really, 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 really big, a bunch of 9s instead of there. And then it says, I asked you to type a number. Was it that hard? In that case, it wasn't a number format exception that was the problem. I just typed in a bunch of 9s. It wasn't a number format exception. It wasn't the fact it was text. It was a number that was too big to be stored as an integer. So it deals with a couple different types of errors that'll come up from there. So just to give you a feel for that sort of thing. So I could classify this out further. I could do an exception, but if I did with an exception, I would also be handling file I/O issues and the SQL issues and all sorts of stuff. So in this case, I went for the most specific thing I could think of, which is the number format exception. It wouldn't handle certain other things like divide by 0 and stuff, but my message is very specific. It said I should type in a number. So that is the core of exception handling. At this point, you should play with this amount of code. You should basically build your code just like I did. Work on getting the base stuff without exception handling there, and get it so you generate the exception. You see the exception happen, so you know what you're trying to catch. And then you can add in your try catch around that, because you know the rest of the code's working, and you can try and figure out this type, getting that done correctly, and getting the variable inside of there, and getting these errors figured out that way. From there, once we get this working, we'll come back and do a little bit more useful stuff with this code. But I want you to just start up with this little micro step before you come back and continue on.